What is up, everybody? This is your boy, Teran Rodriguez, bringing you another edition of Set Point. And we have ourselves a jam-packed show for you all as Wisconsin, the Badgers, they finally won their first ever NCAA Women's Volleyball Championship. They outlasted Nebraska in 5 sets. What an instant classic as the Badgers finally got their first ever NCAA Women's Volleyball Championship. Who stood out? Did Dana Rettke have the monster game? And did we see other players from Wisconsin step up? Also, the NCAA Men's Volleyball season is just around the corner, and the AVCA has released its preseason top 15 coaches poll. Who's on top, and who's on the cusp of possibly knocking on that number 1 spot? So hand me a volleyball, set up the net, because I'm about to serve you up some volleyball action here on Set Point. This is Teran Rodriguez bringing you another edition of Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. And welcome all to another edition of Set Point. Thank you all for joining me on this beautiful Monday afternoon. Happy holidays to you all, as this is going to be the last show before Christmas. And I hope everyone here is having a safe and festive holiday, and I hope you all are being safe because COVID-19 is still out there, and unfortunately, we all got to be safe, got to protect one another, just got to take care of our bodies, just like Marshawn Lynch once said. And without any further delay, let us get on into the volleyball action. But first and foremost, we have a word from our sponsors. The first sponsor for IE Sports Radio is the Southern California Warriors semi-pro football team. The world of semi-pro sports is unlike any other sports organization. Players pay to play in hopes of so many different outcomes, whether it's playing to get filmed to try out for professional teams, big-time colleges, or just playing to stay in shape. No matter what, all semi-pro players have one thing in common, and that's playing for the love of the game. The SoCal Warriors have been on a quest to earn titles and give players second chances since 2017. Whether you're in Southern California or anywhere in the world, give semi-pro sports a chance if you love your sport. You may get that second chance you've been waiting for as an athlete. You can follow the Southern California Warriors on Twitter at SoCal Warriors, on Instagram at SouthernCalifornia_Warriors, and on Facebook by typing in the word Southern California, then Warriors. The second sponsor for IE Sports Radio is Background Check International Businesses. Are you looking to background check a new hire on? Let Kit Fremen take care of that for you. Kit has founded and managed Background Check International since 1994, and he's here to help you with the screening process. Contact Kit and let him help make the hiring process that much easier. This business is used for professional background checks and not for the use of crimes such as identity theft or other illegal activity. They do not have Twitter or Instagram, but they have the Book of Faces, aka Facebook. By typing in the words background, then check, then international, then put a little dash, then BCI. That's where you can find them at. And they also have their website, www.bcint.com. So thank you to those two sponsors for being the official sponsors of IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that sports. You can follow IE Sports Radio on Twitter and on Instagram at IE Sports Radio, and on Facebook by typing in the word IE, then sports, then radio. And IE Sports Radio has its own website, www.iesportsradio.com. And for the last 7.5 years, IE Sports Radio has been bringing you amazing content, ranging from interviewing legendary athletes, coaches, and other authorized media, to building tailor-made shows dedicated to all major sports cities around the country. All the while, we have been continued to be by the fans for the fans. And with your help, IE Sports Radio is ready to take the next big step. When you go to the IE Sports Radio website, www.iesportsradio.com, you'll see a Patreon link with 5 different tiers. The first one starting out at $5, which gets you a shout from all 27 of IE Sports Radio's shows, soon to be 29, by the way. Higher tiers include IE Sports Radio merchandise, access to IE Sports Radio's podcast university, IESRU, and even a chance to be featured on a segment of our flagship show, The Defining Moment. Thank you all for continuing to make IE Sports Radio your direct feed for all that sports. And a big shout to Turban Patriot, the IE Sports Radio Fan of the Month back in the month of October. We're still trying to get a Fan of the Month for November, but Turban Patriot is currently the IE Sports Radio Fan of the Month, and we have to give him a shout out because he is a respectful person, and even though he's a Patriots fan, he's a down-to-earth type of guy, and he just spreads positive vibes all around. And he's also a great judge on 3 and Out, except when he's judging me. I'm kidding. Turban Patriot's a great guy all around. And also, we have to give a shout-out to our Patreon supporters, Bay Area Raised Apparel, and Marcus Losgreat. Thank you to those two for being IE Sports Radio's Patreon supporters and help making IE Sports Radio keep the lights on for all of us podcasters who do what we love to do when it comes to talking sports over the air. So, there are all those announcements. Without any further delay, now let's get on into the NCAA women's volleyball action. So, I'm actually just going to go straight into the final. I will briefly talk about the semifinals, but I'm going to be truthfully honest, I didn't really get to see that just because there was something else that happened on Thursday, and I am a little bit regretful of watching that said sporting event, but I digress. So, for the final, the championship, Wisconsin versus Nebraska. Just going to briefly go over the semifinals. Wisconsin upset Louisville in 5 sets. I was very surprised to see that. I was watching my sporting event and watching the Wisconsin-Louisville match at the same time, and I was like, whoa, Wisconsin is in a battle. And they're up 2-1 in the match over Louisville, and in the 4th set, Wisconsin just could not serve for beans as they kept missing serves left and right, and eventually it paved the way for Louisville to win that 4th set and force the 5th set. But in the 5th set against Louisville, Wisconsin just took charge. I don't think they trailed a whole lot, if not at all, as Wisconsin won the 4th set, or for the 5th set, and they won the match over Louisville, as Louisville unfortunately suffered its first loss of the season, as they were dismissed from the playoffs, or not the playoffs, the tournament, as Wisconsin advanced to their second NCAA Women's Volleyball Championship in 3 seasons. So, great job for Wisconsin. It was a tough loss for Louisville. Perfect season, unfortunately, was not able to be perfected by the Cardinals, but they had a fantastic year. I will say this about Louisville, they will be losing quite a number of players, but they still have a good amount of talent that they return, such as Anna DeBeer. Wisconsin, on the other hand, just had too much firepower, and they just were unable to be brought down by Louisville. So, good job to Wisconsin on that, and a great season to Louisville. As for the other semifinal, I got to see most of it as Pitt and Nebraska were able to face one another, as Nebraska beat Pitt in 4 sets. Pitt took the first set quite convincingly. It was 25-20 or 25-16, and then the next 3 sets, Nebraska just straight up had their way. I mean, some of the sets were close. Like, the 4th set could have gone either way. For Pitt, I think that was their best chance to push the match to 5, or their best chance to take a set from Nebraska after they won that first set. But Nebraska just had too much firepower. Their blocking was on point. Their serving was just sizzling hot. Like, it's like opening a bottle of hot sauce. Bottle of fresh hot sauce made from the factory. And boy howdy, it was just too hot for Pitt to handle, as Nebraska upended the 3-seed Pitt, and It was a tough loss for Pitt. Like, this was probably their best chance to win an NCAA Women's Volleyball Championship with Kayla Lund, Chinazi Endi, Lekator, Member Monet, Serena Gray, all those talented players. They unfortunately just could not get the job done against Nebraska. But Nebraska, I'll be talking about them in a little bit, but Nebraska is such a good team. Like, they are the real deal. Like, there's no better way to put it. Like, Nebraska is for real, man. Like, they're just for real. So, now we fast forward to Saturday, or flashback back to Saturday, where Wisconsin and Nebraska faced one another. The first set, Nebraska just came out swinging. I was really impressed with Nebraska. Their serving was hot. They just put a lot of pressure on Wisconsin. That Nebraska team did not look like a 10 seed, that's for sure. Let's get one thing straight. That was not a 10 seed team. Like, Nebraska really came to play. Wisconsin did make a little bit of a push, but it was way too little, far too late in that set, as Nebraska won the first set 25-22. The second set kind of played out like the first set, except Nebraska just jumped out. After they surrendered the first point, they pretty much led throughout most of the set, and Wisconsin, again, did not look comfortable. And it took a little while for Wisconsin to get their offense going, but they finally got it going as they eventually wound up pulling even with Nebraska. And in the later stages of the set, Nebraska had so many chances. I think they had 4 or 5 set points, but they just could not convert. And Wisconsin had 3 set points of their own. And on the third one, they finally converted as they won the second set 31-29. That was the turning point right there. If Wisconsin does not win that set, and I know this sounds cliche, if Wisconsin does not win that set, it's a whole different perspective. Like, it's a whole different ball game. Let's pretty much just say that. So in the third set, Wisconsin actually led throughout most of the way until Nebraska tried to make a late surge. Eventually, Wisconsin was able to take that set courtesy of, I want to say it was Dana Retke. I'm not entirely certain, but Wisconsin did take the third set 25-23. And at that point, it was looking like this was going to be a barn burner. This one definitely had barn burner written all over it because, spoiler alert, the next 2 sets were decided by 3 points or less. So the fourth set, Nebraska actually jumped out to an early lead. Actually, it was back and forth. Nebraska jumped out to its small but early lead. Then Wisconsin caught up, forced Nebraska into a timeout. Then Nebraska, after they crossed 15, I think it was at 19 points that Nebraska led 23-19 at one point, and eventually had set point at 24-20. But then Wisconsin scored the next 3 points to pull within 24-23. But for some reason, and this really surprised me, Allie Battenhorst, off of a not so good pass, was able to hit the ball deep near the back line and give Nebraska the point, forcing a fifth set. I was like, wow. Because if she hits that ball a little too far, then it's a whole different point, and it's 24-24, and Wisconsin's still putting pressure on Nebraska because Wisconsin was starting to serve better. One thing I did not like from Wisconsin was their serving was not that great through most of the match. They did have they do serve tough, and they do have some talented servers on their team, like Izzy Ashburn. But for the most part, they kept on whiffing on their serves. I should also make note that Gio Savita had some tough serves, which really got Nebraska out of system, which was very darn good of themselves. So the fifth set was probably the most intriguing set of all. Wisconsin jumped out to a 7-0 lead. Like, the first 3 points, Wisconsin won, Nebraska calls timeout. The next 3 points, Wisconsin won, Nebraska calls timeout. And they're fresh out of timeouts. I was very surprised to see John Cook doing this. I'm like, that's not really like John Cook. It's like, John Cook normally saves his timeouts for when his team is in a pickle. But I guess he needed to call timeout. And it's the fifth set. The championship is on the line. I understand what John Cook needed to do, and he definitely needed to do that. But I think he could have saved one of his timeouts for a little bit later. But I'm not the coach. John Cook is the coach, and I guess he wanted to try to stop the bleeding. As for the 7-0 start, it looked as if Wisconsin was going to win this one, right? Not quite, just because Nebraska did not quit. They did not quit at all, and honestly, I give them a lot of credit. Like, they were still in it, and I'm like, it would be silly for Wisconsin to think that they have this match in the bag, because they clearly don't, considering Nebraska did not get this far just to lose and probably not score, because Wisconsin is a talented team, but Nebraska has defied the odds. They upset 2-seed Texas in the Elite Eight. They upset 3-seed Pitt in the Final Four. So I knew Nebraska was going to come back with some late surge. And then it was match point. Like, Nebraska got to within 3 points, and then Wisconsin eventually pulled ahead 14-10, and then, 14-9, and it was championship point number 1. Nebraska dodged it and scored. Match point number 2, 14-10, Wisconsin. Nebraska dodges that one. And then I believe Kelly Sheffield took a timeout for Wisconsin. He had one more remaining, if I'm not mistaken. Actually, no, he did not have another timeout. That was his final timeout. And honestly, he definitely needed to use that final timeout in that situation, and I think it was the wise thing to do. Then, set point number 3, 14-11, it looked as if Nebraska hit the ball out, and it didn't touch the block, and Wisconsin is celebrating like they won. However, like the sly silver fox John Cook is, he had a challenge remaining. Like, that was the key right there. Like, Nebraska did not have any challenges going into that 5th set, but when the match goes into a 5th set, you get one challenge. Both teams get one more challenge, and fortunately for John Cook, he had one last challenge. He had one last trick up his sleeve. John Cook always does this, and I don't blame him because it's a last-ditch effort, and the replay showed that the ball just barely touched the block. And since it was definitive evidence, the call was overturned, and Nebraska won the point. It was 14-12 Wisconsin at match point number 4. Then it was a long rally for Wisconsin and Nebraska, but then, how fitting, Dana Retke was able to pound the block off of a slide kill, and that was that. Wisconsin won its first ever NCAA Women's Volleyball Championship. They had lost to Nebraska in 5 sets back in 2000, in John Cook's first year, where Nebraska went a perfect 34-0. They had lost to Penn State in 4 sets back in 2013, which saw Russ Rose and the Nittany Lions win another NCAA Women's Volleyball Championship the year after. Then in 2019, Stanford, which had a talented plethora of players such as Catherine Plummer, Jenna Gray, Morgan Hentz, Madeline Gates, Megan McClure, even though she's not a senior. That team swept Wisconsin out of the final back in 2019. This time, the 4th time was the charm for Wisconsin, and it was a great ending for a bunch of those players. Like, the players such as Dana Retke, Grace Loberg, even though she's a natural senior. I don't think she's coming back for a 5th year. Not sure about that. Lauren Barnes, Sydney Hilly, Gio Savita, and the one that didn't get to play... and one of the players that didn't get to play for Wisconsin, not Grace Loberg, but I'm actually blanking on her name. How do I forget that? Danielle Hart, that's her name. Danielle Hart. Now I remembered. So Danielle Hart, those seniors finally got to witness a championship. So it was a great storybook ending for them, as Wisconsin was led by, surprisingly not Dana Retke. Their leading kill leader was Anna Smrek, who had 14 kills, 2 hitting errors, and a hitting percentage of .429. And she also had 7 blocks on the night. Believe it or not, Anna Smrek, only a freshman, was named the most outstanding player in that match. I was very surprised. Now, you're wondering, how did a freshman get to start in a championship game? Well, it started all the way back in, I think it was a practice back in September where I think it was like September or early October, where Danielle Hart tore her ACL in practice and her season was over, and it was just heartbreaking. But Danielle Hart's injury paved the way for Anna Smrek to come in and get some playing time. And Smrek definitely took advantage of that. And she came up big on the biggest stage. And she also came up big in the Final Four matchup against Louisville. She had 20 kills and she only had one hitting error on 27 swings. Those are Madden numbers right there. And all in all, Anna Smrek really stepped up. She was the most outstanding player of the tournament. I thought it would be Dana Retke, but honestly, Anna Smrek really stepped up, and I could not be more impressed with her. And she's only a freshman. That's the scary thing. Smrek is going to be a problem for teams going down the road. And the thing about Smrek is, I like her work ethic. Like last year, she came to Wisconsin. She graduated early from high school, and unfortunately, she wasn't eligible to play on the team just because she was theoretically still in high school. So she got to play. She didn't get to play, but she got to practice and she got to learn with the team. As once again, the NCAA Women's Volleyball Championship or tournament from last season took place in the spring, and she graduated early from December or January, and then eventually went to Wisconsin to learn under Kelly Sheffield and the other older players. So for Anna Smrek, she definitely does deserve that most outstanding player honor, and I really think she's going to be something special. She's 6'9". That is what is going to terrorize teams, and she doesn't just do well offensively. She does well defensively as well. Like, her blocks are just so tough to get by, and she even can play right side. That's the scary part of her. So Anna Smrek is your most outstanding player of the tournament, and that's awesome sauce. As for the rest of the players in the match against Wisconsin, Jade Demps, another player that stepped up, had 12 kills, only 3 hitting errors for a hitting percentage of .346. She also had 9 digs, and she had a crucial service ace, which put Wisconsin at championship point. She is only a sophomore, and she is going to also cause problems. Like, we all thought Wisconsin was going to be taking a step back after this year, after they lost Dana Retke and Grace Loberg and everyone else. But Jade Demps steps up, and she rises to the occasion, and honestly, she is going to be something to watch for. She is definitely something special, and I can hardly see what is her future for her. Then Dana Retke also chipped in 11 kills. She had 2 hitting errors, and she had 31 swings for a hitting percentage of .290. She also chipped in 10 blocks. She actually also had 3 solo stuffs and 10 block assists, which actually turned out to be 13 blocks, so my mistake. So she had 13 blocks overall, and honestly, Retke did Dana Retke things. She stepped up, and she knew she did not want to go out like that. She wanted to go out as a champion, and she also needed to step up just because this was going to be the last time she would get to this moment. And she even said it in the post-game interview. She said, "This is what I returned for," and she had unfinished business, and she wanted to return, and she also wanted to achieve the goal for Wisconsin. So great job for Dana Retke. And also need to add that Grace Loberg added 10 kills for Wisconsin, and she also impressed as well. Some eye-popping stats that stand out to me were the blocks. Now, the blocks, Wisconsin really excelled in. The best offense is also a great defense, and vice versa. The best defense is also a great offense, as Wisconsin had 24 blocks compared to Nebraska's 10. Wisconsin had 40 block assists and 4 solo stuffs, which was absolutely amazing. And boy howdy, it really paid dividends, as Devin Robinson also chipped in 10 blocks to go along with her 6 kills. And like I said, Dana Retke had 13 blocks on the night, and then also Anna Smrek had 7 blocks, Julia Orzel chipped in 6 blocks, and Sydney Hilly, the setter, had 5 blocks. Hilly also chipped in 2 kills and 51 assists, while another eye-popping stat, in my opinion, was the service aces and service errors. Now, Wisconsin did not serve the ball the greatest, but when they were serving tough, they really got Nebraska out of system. One player who I thought served really well was Izzy Ashburn. She had 4 service aces and only 2 service errors. Absolutely amazing serving from her. Gio Savita also had a service ace. She also served tough, like I said earlier. She also chipped in 9 digs as well. Keep in mind, Gio Savita had a torn ACL, and the fact that she still played was freaking amazing. And I don't think anyone could judge her heart and her soul when it comes to the sport of volleyball. I am very impressed by her. I know she won't be playing professionally in the near future, but honestly, I'm glad she went out a champion. She transferred from Wichita State to Wisconsin, and she's now an NCAA women's volleyball champion. Now, the digs were also eye-popping as well, as Nebraska had a bunch of digs. They actually outdid Wisconsin in this department. Nebraska had 93 digs compared to Wisconsin's 79. Nebraska also had 5 different players in double digits in terms of digs, and 2 of those players had 20 or more, as Kiana Akana had 24 digs. Nicklin Hames also chipped in 23 digs to go along with her 51 assists. Hames was doing all that she can to try to get Nebraska the win and pull off another stunning upset. Maddie Kubik had 14 digs. Lexi Rodriguez, the National Freshman of the Year, added 13 digs, and Kenzie Knuckles added 10 digs. She also added a kill, which was darn right impressive. So, for Nebraska as a whole, they were led by Maddie Kubik, who had 19 kills. She did have 12 hitting errors, but again, most of those errors came via blocks from Wisconsin. And as a whole, Nebraska had 39 hitting errors compared to Wisconsin's 25. So Wisconsin really made Nebraska uncomfortable when it came to getting kills. Kayla Caffey also chipped in 15 kills, while Lindsay Krause added 12 kills, Allie Battenhorst added 11 kills, and Lauren Stivrins added 10 kills. As a team, Nebraska hit only 141, as they had no set that they hit more than 200, which was very surprising. Their best set came in set 4, where they hit 194. For Wisconsin, they hit only 183, as their best sets came in set 2 and set 4, as they hit over 200 in those sets. But they were able to make do with what they got. As most of the defense was what won the game for Wisconsin, because their blocking was amazing. They kept digging the ball really well, as Lauren Barnes added 31 digs, even though Wisconsin only had 79 compared to Nebraska's 93. But Lauren Barnes had 31 digs. She was just all over the place. Haley chipped in 13 digs. Orzel had 12 digs, and I think I mentioned this earlier, Gio Savita added 9 digs, and Jade Demps also had 9 digs to go along with those 12 kills. So, all in all for Wisconsin, they just played a great game. It was a fantastic match overall. Both teams were just going back and forth. Honestly, I gotta give credit to Nebraska. I think Nebraska really made Wisconsin work, especially in that 5th set. Like, everyone would have definitely thought that this match is over. Wisconsin is going to win. It's 7-0. There's no way Nebraska comes back. But there's lots of set remaining. And while Nebraska did not have any more timeouts after John Cook called the second one at 6-0, he knew there was plenty of set remaining, and he knew that his team can get the win over this Wisconsin team. Like, Wisconsin is definitely a great team, but like I said, Nebraska has been defying the odds all season long, and more importantly, this Wisconsin team and Nebraska team are just, there's not much separating them. Like, Wisconsin obviously won the first matchup in straight sets. They won the second matchup against Nebraska in 4 sets. So it was obviously fitting that this match had to go the distance. And Nebraska made them work for it. Like, they could have easily just folded in that 4th set after their 24-20 lead evaporated. But Nebraska took care of business. They took risks whenever they could, and more importantly, they just made sure they didn't give up. Like, I think that was the key. I think everyone didn't expect them to go far, me included, and I'm guilty of that. But I'm also willing to say that Nebraska has a great amount of talent across the board, and a lot of their players are only underclassmen. Like, John Cook made the decision of not starting his upperclassmen like his seniors and just started his freshmen, such as Krause, Battenhorst, Rodriguez. He even decided not to play his returning senior, Lexi Sun, who had no problems with not getting playing time or sacrificing her playing time or starting time just so the freshmen can blossom and bloom. So, all in all, for Nebraska, their future still looks bright, and I think that those players, I think Nebraska could be doing the same thing. I think those players that are currently seniors that have one more year in them will definitely be taking that fifth year option, but I could definitely see Nebraska being back in the championship game, and they have nothing to be sad about. They gave it their all this entire tournament. They made Wisconsin work. They toppled 2 of the top 3 seeds, and more importantly, they have a lot of players returning. And John Cook isn't going anywhere. I could already assure you that. So, for Nebraska, they have nothing to be sad about. As we welcome Larry B into the chat room, he says, on Wisconsin, he said, it's a great call Saturday night. Yes, thank you, Larry. I broadcast the game on USRN, and Larry asks, is that girl's name really Knuckles? Yes, it is Knuckles. Her last name is Kenzie Knuckles, and whenever Nebraska is up to serve and she's serving, she actually just, every Nebraska fan sticks out their arms and clenches their fists. So, and Larry says, is that a nickname? No, it's Kenzie's actual last name. And that is indeed a legit last name. So, Kenzie Knuckles sacrificed her libero position for Lexi Rodriguez, who actually was named the Freshman of the Year. So, for Knuckles to do that is absolutely amazing, and she's coming back still. Like, I don't see any reason why she should transfer. So, for Wisconsin, however, they have a lot of returning players as well, as they have returned Jay Demps. They return Izzy Ashburn. Julia Orzel, the freshman, also returns. And honestly, and then obviously Anna Smrek and many others as well. So I think Wisconsin, I don't think it'll be easy for Wisconsin to repeat, but I don't think anyone should count them out. Like, obviously they're losing 6 players this year, all of which were on the teams that went to the finals and went to the semifinals. So there is that right there. So for Wisconsin, I think they could have a good season next year, but Nebraska is probably looking to take the crown next year. I think Nebraska has a very, very, very good chance at winning it all next year. As let us go to our our NCAA women's volleyball team superlative. So I actually did this idea last season in the spring when the NCAA women's volleyball tournament concluded, and I basically had like the NCAA women's volleyball team superlatives. It's kind of like senior superlatives from high school, where you're voted best dressed, most athletic, most spirited, best all around. Those are my NCAA Women's Volleyball Superlatives. So there is that right there. And so we'll start with the first seniors, or not senior superlative, NCAA Women's Volleyball Tournament Superlative. So most outstanding team is a complete no-brainer. Wisconsin. That was my most outstanding team, and they finally got the job done. I also can give honorable mention to Louisville, but they lost in the semifinals. But the fact that they went 32-0, only just 32-0 going into the semifinals is absolutely legit. I don't know if we'll be seeing that anytime soon, but for Louisville, they're kind of my honorable mention. Also got to give honorable mention to Nebraska just because their tournament run was outstanding as well. They just were a few plays short, and I'm willing to say that if Nebraska did not get off to that horrid start of being down 7-0 in the fifth set, I think Nebraska would have maybe turned the tide, but unfortunately it wasn't meant to be. But next year. So the most outstanding team without a doubt is Wisconsin, and the teams that overachieved, which to me that means teams that I thought that won more games as opposed to me projecting or several other people projecting them to win X amount of games or go X far. So the honorable mentions, in my opinion, were Minnesota and Illinois. Minnesota made the Elite Eight. I didn't think they would go farther than the round of 32 just because they were facing Stanford, and Stanford is a talented team. The first time around, Minnesota took on Stanford. They barely beat them in 5 sets, and honestly, I thought that it was going to be a whole different ball game, but Minnesota advanced to the Elite Eight, where they fell to the eventual champion, Wisconsin, as they also upset Baylor and in the Sweet 16. And then Illinois' case, well, let me just tell you, Illinois, I don't think anyone had them going to the Sweet 16 because they had to take on Kentucky, the 7th seed and reigning national champion. But Illinois was able to topple Kentucky at Kentucky in 4 sets, and I was very surprised. I didn't think Illinois was going to win that one, let alone win a set. But I was very impressed by Illinois, and I think that was probably their best match of the season. So Illinois really showed up in that match. So as for the teams that I think that overachieved, this one's a no-brainer. The first one's a no-brainer. I picked 2 in this category. The first one was Nebraska, and the second one was Kansas. So Nebraska, they need no introduction. They made it all the way to the championship match. They upset Texas, the 2 seed, in 4 sets in the quarterfinals. And then the semifinals, they upset Pitt, the 3 seed, in 4 sets. That Texas win was more remarkable just because Texas beat them in the Elite Eight last year, and it was a crushing loss. But for Nebraska, they were able to use. I kind of feel they used that as motivation to get back at Texas, and more importantly, I just think that Nebraska had a special team this year, and I think everyone doubted them, and then I think they used that as bulletin board material, and John Cook really steered the ship to the promised land. They just fell a little bit short, but there's nothing a few returners and a few hard work and off-season training will pay off and do wonders for. So the other team I picked for this one was Kansas. Now, Kansas made it all the way to the Sweet 16, but I'm just going to say this. I don't think anybody had Kansas getting past the first round. They had to face Oregon, which was very, 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 very talented, as Kansas not only beat Oregon, they swept Oregon. Keep in mind, Oregon plays in the very tough Pac-12, where that's crawling with talented teams like Stanford, UCLA, Washington State, Utah. Even some teams that didn't even make the tournament were good, like Colorado, USC. The list goes on and on. But the fact that Kansas swept Oregon was absolutely amazing. I was like, wow. I don't think anyone had that on their bingo card. And the fact that Kansas did that, just amazing. But it didn't stop there. Kansas was able to upend Creighton at Creighton in 4 sets. So the fact that Kansas was able to pull off 2 big wins against 2 talented teams, with Creighton being a seeded team, the 14th seed, was absolutely phenomenal. Unfortunately for Kansas, they fell to Pitt in the round of 16 in straight sets, but Kansas can hang their hat on an amazing season. And it was just amazing. They really showed up for the Big Ten, especially since Baylor lost in the round of 16, and Texas was on the verge of losing in the round of 16. But unfortunately for Texas and for Washington, Texas rose from the grave and defeated Washington to become the lone Big 12 team to advance. So I think I said Big 10, but I meant to say Big 12. So Kansas really put the Big 12 on its back when it came to the round of 32. So there's that. So the teams that underachieved. So this is basically the teams that I thought were actually going to go far but didn't go far. So my honorable mentions were Baylor and Stanford. Now, Stanford, it's tough to really make a case for just because they were facing Minnesota on the road and they weren't seeded. But I thought Stanford had that championship mentality. I get they're still a couple years away and they're 2 years removed from winning the championship, but I thought Stanford would have actually came with a better game plan to take down Minnesota. I thought they would at least take 1 set off them. Like, losing to Minnesota in straight sets was actually the first time Minnesota swept Stanford. I was like, wow. I could not believe it. And seeing Stanford in person against USC, I was like, well, this Stanford team might actually be legit. Keep in mind, Stanford actually was in a good position to win the Pac-12, but unfortunately injuries to key players such as Kendall Kipp and Cammie Minor really derailed those hopes. They lost to the Arizona schools, and eventually they just had to settle for being an unseeded team. So I can't really knock Stanford that much, but I did have Stanford getting past Minnesota in the round of 32. But I guess Minnesota was just better prepared. But I can't blame Stanford all that much. Baylor, on the other hand, now it's also tough to blame Baylor for not getting past the round of 16. But they have 2 talented players in Avery Skinner and Yassiana Presley. I thought they would at least get to the Elite 8. But they ran into a very tough team in Minnesota. And honestly, I thought Minnesota did not have anything left in the tank. Like, Baylor had them dead in the water. They were legit up at after the halfway point of the 4th set. I thought Baylor was going to close the door and punch their ticket to the Elite 8. Minnesota turned the tables on them, won the 4th set, and they eventually won the 5th set after a close early tie in the 5th set as Minnesota eventually pulled away. So that's kind of the reason why I have Baylor as honorable mention of teams that underachieved. Now, the teams for me that underachieved were Kentucky and Creighton. Now, for Creighton's case, I don't think anyone predicted that Kentucky would get past the first round and Creighton would lose to Kansas. I'm sorry, Kansas would get out of the first round, and Kansas would upend Creighton. But I thought Creighton was better than that. Creighton had a legit team. I think they're probably the best or second best Power 5 team or non-Power 5 team in the tournament behind BYU. And I honestly didn't think Creighton would lose on their home floor. But for Creighton, I just think that they ran into a hotter team in Kansas, a team that had been coming off of a big win, and I thought Creighton was a little better, but Kansas was just such a blazing hot team. But for me, I expected Creighton to at least get to the Sweet 16. That's no knock on Kansas, but I'm just going to say I think Kansas might have exposed Creighton. But all in all, I didn't expect Creighton to go too far. I thought Sweet 16 was Creighton's ceiling. So I feel Creighton had a little bit less of an excuse to get out of the round of 32, and I have them as a less of an excuse to put them in the mainly underachieved category. Like Baylor, like it was close picking between Creighton and Baylor. Like Baylor has a legit excuse because they faced a tough Minnesota team who was battle tested. Baylor, on the other hand, wasn't really battle tested in their conference outside of Texas and maybe Texas Tech, but all in all, I kind of give Baylor the benefit of the doubt of Minnesota just like getting out of the round of 32 and then getting past them in the Sweet 16. Like Creighton lost in 4. Now, if they had lost in 5, I maybe would have put Baylor in this category, but it's kind of tough to defend Creighton after them straight up laying a goose egg. Like, they were down 0-2 in the match, they won the third set, and then the fourth set, it was just pretty much all Kansas. So, Creighton was one of the main teams that I had as teams that underachieved. The other team that I had as teams that underachieved were Kentucky. Now, obviously it's tough for Kentucky to repeat as champions because no Madison Lilly, no Gabby Curry, no Avery Skinner. She is at Baylor, or she was at Baylor. But for Kentucky, my thing is, you're the reigning national champion, you're at home, you're the 7th seed. How do you lose to Illinois? Now, Illinois has had some good wins this season. If I remember correctly, they did beat Purdue. They also beat Penn State. But for Kentucky, they went nearly perfect in SEC play. They had a bunch of talented matchups that prepared them for SEC play. I find this hard to believe. I found it really hard to believe that Kentucky was bounced in the second round. Like, it got to the point where Tennessee fans were hooting and hollering at Kentucky's belly flop. So, for Kentucky, I expected them to at least get to the Sweet 16. And I think everyone would have loved to see Nebraska versus Kentucky because Illinois put up a stinker against Nebraska. And that's no disrespect to Illinois because Nebraska is a mastermind team and they had already beaten Illinois twice. But if there was any team that could have derailed Nebraska, it would have been Kentucky. But unfortunately, Kentucky fell to Illinois in the round of 32, and I was rather surprised. I get that Kentucky didn't have the horses like they did last spring, but still, they had some of their players. They had Maddie Skinner back. They had a lot of Azani Teeler back. They had Allie Stumler, the SEC Player of the Year, back. Like, it's hard to believe that this team just wasn't able to pull out the victory in the round of 32. And Illinois, they were good, but on paper they weren't great. But again, I can't knock Illinois because in the NCAA tournament, anything is possible. Everyone is 0-0 and whatnot. So there's that for my teams that underachieved. Now for my teams that disappointed. Now, this isn't trying to be mean or anything. This is just a team that I thought could have gotten to a certain point in the NCAA tournament, but unfortunately did not. And this category was actually limited to teams that lost in the first round. So my honorable mentions were Pepperdine and Michigan. Pepperdine lost to UCF, which UCF is actually an underwhelming team. I think UCF does not get the credit they rightfully deserve because they play in a non-Power 5 conference and they didn't really have too many standout-ish wins. And Pepperdine, on the other hand, I thought they'd at least get to the round of 32. I would have loved to see Pepperdine versus UCLA, just because it's the Battle of Southern California, and it's basically two neighboring schools. Well, not like neighboring, like Malibu versus Inglewood, but still. Unfortunately, Pepperdine kind of underachieved against UCF, but UCF's a good team. I will give them credit. So that's why I put Pepperdine in the honorable mention category. Now for Michigan, it's tough for me to say Michigan was a disappointing team just because Michigan had a tough matchup in the first round facing Ball State. Ball State had probably one of its most historic seasons in its tenure. It had the second most wins in its tenure. They won the MAC conference. The Ball State Cardinals were able to take down Michigan in 5 sets, which I thought Michigan was going to get out of the first round, but it turns out Michigan just fell short, especially in that 5th set. And believe it or not, Ball State won its first NCAA women's volleyball tournament match since 1995. If you're all doing the math correctly, that's nearly 30 years since Ball State won its last NCAA tournament. I could not believe that, but I was rather impressed by Ball State. So, good job to the Cardinals. But I don't think I could put Michigan in the full category of teams that disappointed. But the teams that, to me, that disappointed in the first round were, the first one being Oregon. So Oregon, I don't really need to explain this. You're a battle-tested team. You play a very tough schedule. Well, not very tough, but a fairly tough schedule. And you get bounced in the first round by Kansas. Now, again, Kansas deserves a lot of credit. They really came to play in the Battle of the Birds. But to get swept, it really makes you wonder, how do you lose in the first round? Like, I thought Oregon was better than that. Like, you're battle-tested practically every night in the Pac-12. Well, mostly every night. And then you put up a stinker. I know some of the sets were close. Most of them were decided by less than 5 points. But this isn't men's basketball. This is women's volleyball. Like, Oregon should not be putting up a stinker. Like, you're doing the Pac-12 a disservice. So, I kind of can't defend Oregon on this one. Like, I'm pretty sure everyone had Oregon out of the first round, except for Jayhawks fans. So, for Oregon, I have them down as my most disappointing team, and I just was astounded by them in a not-so-good way. So, that's my first team that disappointed. My second team that disappointed me in the first round of the tournament was San Diego. Now, San Diego, to me, was a disappointment throughout a majority of the season. I'm not trying to say their season was a wash. They just had losses to some of the upper-ranked teams, like Texas, Utah. They did have that one win against UCLA, which was very impressive, but they also had to go 5 with USC, which that wasn't really a recipe for success. They did win that one, but the following night, they eventually lost to Long Beach State, and I was there to witness it. So, for San Diego, I also was disappointed in their season in the West Coast Conference, just because they did have that win over Pepperdine, but they had to reverse sweep LMU, and while they did take a set off of BYU, they just were not the same team. And I thought San Diego was at least going to get out of the first round. I get their first round matchup was a tough one against Rice, and Rice had a lot of unfinished business to attend to, but San Diego got swept. They got spanked. I just could not believe that San Diego put up that bad of a matchup. I get it, San Diego went through a lot of ups and downs, but they have some talent. They had Katie Lukes and Grace Froling. I guess the pressure when it came to Texas was just as big as their opponents were. I get Rice is also good, and Rice also played a very tough schedule, but still, I was very disappointed in San Diego. It kind of caps off San Diego's season as a whole. Not that their season was a major disappointment, but I had this feeling San Diego was very suspect. Like, ever since that Long Beach State loss, they had this disappointing effort. Like, their coach walked off in disappointment, their players walked off in disappointment. Everything was pretty much disappointing after that loss against Long Beach State. And I did not even see them coming close to winning the West Coast Conference. So, yeah, to me, San Diego just had a disappointing season. or a disappointing run in the NCAA tournament. Because, again, I feel the West Coast Conference is more battle-tested than the Conference USA. I'm not trying to say that Western Kentucky is not that great, or the other teams in the Conference USA aren't that great, but I will say that when you're facing BYU and Pepperdine and a very talented LMU and a very underrated Santa Clara team and a Pacific team that actually pulled off 2 ranked wins, I thought that San Diego would have at least gotten a set-off of Rice, as we welcome Ben Suttereth into the chat room. Hey, how you doing, buddy? And Larry describes San Diego's women's volleyball team such as San Diego State football. Funny thing is that they're both neighboring schools. So, for San Diego, I just thought that they could have played so much better, but unfortunately, they just straight up disappointed. And against Rice, a team that was the runner-up in their Conference USA tournament, I think that could have been easy pickings. I know Rice didn't have to go that far when it came to traveling as opposed to San Diego, but when it came down to it, San Diego just could not rise to the occasion. And I feel maybe Long Beach State might have broken San Diego. I'm not trying to say San Diego's season was an overall disappointment. I'm just saying it wasn't as great as I imagined it would be. So there's that. So now we go to my next superlative: teams with a bright future and most returners. So my honorable mention with this one is Ball State, which only loses 3. So Ball State, I actually deferred to them because the next category I'm going to have them in. But Ball State returns all but 3 players on their team. And that's a scary thing to imagine, just because Ball State won the MAC, and if they're doing great with just 3 seniors or 3 eventual players that are not gonna come back, then you can only imagine what they can do with a team that they return majority when it comes to next season. And I think it's going to be something to watch for. And who knows? Maybe we'll see them get some love. Maybe they'll be the new Western Kentucky or BYU or Pepperdine or San Diego, because we need more non-Power 5 conferences in the top 25. So as for the teams with a bright future and most returners, the first one is Texas. So while Texas did lose in the Elite 8, they return a lot of players. They return all but 2 of their players. They lose Breon Butler and they lose Sydney Peterson. They do return Logan Eggleston, Asia O'Neal, Nalani Yosia. They return quite a number of players next season, and their recruiting class is definitely going to give them a boost. And then I think Jana Gabriel also returns, and she's only a junior. So for for Texas, this is going to be a very promising season. I had them winning it all, as I actually posted my bracket, and unfortunately now I feel silly because Texas lost in the Elite 8. But I think the future definitely looks bright for Texas. It only continues to get bright because Texas is kind of this blue blood, if I'm using that term correctly. They're this blue blood when it comes to women's volleyball, and they're just so good. Every year, they are freaking amazing. You can't fault them. And Jared Elliott does a great job when it comes to his program. And then the other team that I had in this category of bright future / most returners was Illinois. They returned 3 players, they will only lose 3 players this year. And I think Illinois is starting to get back on track. Last spring, they just fell a little bit short. They did have one impressive victory, but it wasn't enough to get them into the tournament. Doesn't help that it's an all-conference schedule that they're playing. And then also this year, they really took a step forward because they beat the Penn State, they beat the Purdue. I think Illinois is taking baby steps, but they are back to being one of the more dominant teams in NCAA women's volleyball. Back when they had Michelle Barch-Hackley and Jordan Poulter. So that's why I think Illinois is a team with a bright future and most returners. And I imagine they'll get some good recruits, because there has to be some good recruits that they recruited within their area or without their area. So the last category I had when it comes to this NCAA Women's Volleyball Tournament team superlatives is teams with the most historic win. And I didn't have any honorable mentions because I only had 2 teams in this, and these 2 teams were a no-brainer. The first team was Ball State, the team that won their first NCAA tournament match since 1995, and it was only their 3rd in team history, which was darn right impressive. And they finished 30-3, if I'm not mistaken, 30-4. They finished with 30 wins. And honestly, that's only the 2nd time they finished with 30 wins. The last time was in the 1980s. I think it was 1981 or 1982 when they had 32. But that was when they played like 40 matches in one season. And I think that was the first year the MAC was assembled. So for Ball State, that is they're basically in this category of teams with best historic win, and beating Michigan was not an easy task. Michigan is a very good team, but Ball State was able to pull out the win. And the best part is for Ball State is that they returned all but 3 players. Like, there's a reason why I had Ball State in the honorable mention category of my last superlative, because I had to put them in here because Ball State had a fantastic win, and they grinded it out against Michigan. Like, Michigan is a Power 5 conference team, and they are in the Big Ten, so there's that right there. So the second team I had when it came to team with best historic win was Florida Gulf Coast. So, believe it or not, Florida Gulf Coast, once upon a time, back in 2008, in Florida, Florida Gulf Coast knocked off UCF in 5 sets, and I believe UCF was the 13th seed at the time. This season, they reverse swept Texas Tech in 5 sets in the first round, and believe it or not, that this year's win is actually only the 2nd win in Florida Gulf Coast women's volleyball history. I was very astounded at that. I was like, wow, Florida Gulf Coast only won its 2nd NCAA tournament match in team history. I could not believe that. Like, it's so hard to believe that some of these teams haven't really won a whole lot of these NCAA women's volleyball tournament matches. But for Florida Gulf Coast to not only beat Texas Tech, but reverse sweep them is absolutely phenomenal. I know Florida Gulf Coast eventually lost to the champion in Wisconsin in the round of 32, but for Florida Gulf Coast to do that is very amazing. And they won 27 matches this season. That actually ties a program record. So Florida Gulf Coast has nothing to hang its head down over. They have a lot to be proud of, and honestly, it's really amazing that Florida Gulf Coast had its 2nd NCAA women's volleyball tournament win, and also they tied their single-season most wins in a season, which is very phenomenal. So, good job to Florida Gulf Coast. I'm very happy for them, and that's pretty much all my superlatives. So before we head to a commercial break, we're actually going to go to the final AVCA Women's Volleyball Division I Coaches Poll. So, without any further delay, let's go from 25 to 21. So, 25 is Miami of Florida, which won an NCAA tournament game against South Alabama. 24 was Oregon, which I'm surprised they got put at 24. They lost in the first round. Come on. I'm not trying to be mean here, but still. 23 was Washington State, which got out of the first round. I believe I'm blanking on who they beat in the first round, but Washington State did win an NCAA tournament matchup, which was quite nice. They eventually lost to Baylor in straight sets, but Washington State gave their opponent a run for the money. Washington State beat Northern Colorado, so no wonder I was kind of blanking on that. So 22 was Creighton, another team that lost in the first round, and then 21 is Stanford, which lost in the round of 32 after they beat Iowa State in 4 sets. So then 20 through 16 includes Western Kentucky, which was ranked pretty much all year, they won their first round matchup before bowing out to Georgia Tech. Then 19 was Kansas, which made it to the Sweet 16. 18 is Utah, which lost in the round of 32 to BYU in the Holy War. 17 was Penn State, which lost in the round of 32 to Pitt after winning its first round matchup. And then 16 is Illinois, which eventually wound up reaching the Sweet 16. 15 through 11 consists of Florida at 15, which made the Sweet 16. Kentucky at 14, which lost in the round of 32. 13 is UCLA, which wound up going to the Sweet 16. 12 is Washington, which made the Sweet 16 but got reverse swept by Texas. And 11 is Ohio State, which got swept by Georgia Tech in the Sweet 16. So 10 through 6 consists of Baylor at 10, which lost in the Sweet 16. BYU at 9, which disappointingly lost in the Sweet 16 after they were up 14-10 in the fifth set to Purdue. 8 was Georgia Tech, which lost in the Elite 8. 7 was Minnesota, which also lost in the Elite 8. And 6 is Purdue, which also lost in the Elite 8. Which I think you're starting to know the pattern of the top 5. So the top 5 through 1, consists of Texas at 5, which lost in the Elite 8. Pitt at 4, which lost in the Final 4. Louisville at 3, which lost in the Final 4. Nebraska at 2, which lost in the championship match. And the obvious number 1 team in the final 2021 AVCA Division I Women's Volleyball Coaches Poll is Wisconsin. So Wisconsin is the undisputed number 1 team in women's volleyball in terms of the coaches poll. And it'll be interesting to see how they will do next year. So take ourselves a quick commercial break. When we come back, we'll talk some men's volleyball, NCAA men's volleyball action, as the AVCA Preseason coaches poll has been released. Who's on the top 15 and who is the favorite to win the certain number of conferences? We'll find out in a little bit. You're listening to Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that sports. We'll be right back after this.
What's up, sports fans? Are you looking for the latest on Northern California sports? Then take a trip out west with me, your host, Gina G, on Reppin' the NorCal Sports, right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. I'll be bringing it to you all the way live every Monday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. And it's always a packed show. I'll bring you everything Dynastic 49ers, the bite of the San Jose Sharks, torture of the San Francisco Giants, the Golden State Warriors that we still believe. Then take you across the bay to the rise and grind of the Oakland A's. I've got you covered on college ball from the Cal Bears to the Stanford Cardinal, so that no matter what, reppin' in NorCal Sports is always reppin' the Bay. So if you bleed red and gold, or you're looking to keep an eye out west in them thar hills, don't miss me, Gina G, on reppin' in NorCal Sports. Catch me every Monday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, and I'll have your fandom revved harder than a trio of defenders guarding Stephen Curry before his buzzer beater is Gucci.
What is going on, everybody? My name is Harrison Glazer, and we're coming at you from the Show That Never Sleeps podcast. I cover the Jets, the Islanders, the Nets, and the Yankees.
This is Pierre Moss, and I cover the Mets, Knicks, Rangers, and the Giants.
Our show is live every Wednesday through Spreaker and a bunch of other ways to get our content. Again, we're the Show That Never Sleeps podcast. We talk about all those New York sports. It's a lot of fun. We get into all of it. Please tune in. Again, that's Wednesdays at 6 p.m.
And we look forward to having you guys right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
College football, and do you want to hear a college football show dedicated to all that is college football, including junior college and the CCAA and the NJCAA, the NAIA, and the NCAA, including Division III, Division II, Division I AA in the FCS, and Division I A in the FBS? Well then look no further. Join myself, Larry B., and my colleagues, Mr. H-Town Blake Henley, and Mr. Christian Espinoza, each week during the college football season for the latest in college football on 3 and Out College Edition, right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
That is right, everybody. Definitely do check out 3 and Out College Edition because it is bowl season. Uh-oh. Sorry. There was a little technical difficulties. My clicker is kind of on the fritz, and unfortunately I got to use my mouse pad to, tap on it. But definitely do check out 3 and Out College Edition. It is one of the most absolute amazing shows on iSports Radio. All of our shows are amazing, but me and Larry B are the Batman and Robin of college football, and it is bowl season, and you definitely do need to check it out because we definitely get into all of the bowl games, whether it's NAIA, NCAA Division III, NCAA Division II, NCAA FCS, or NCAA FBS. Heck, even the 3C2A or NJCAA, we love to talk college football. And check out all of our other amazing shows, such as Reppin' to NorCal Sports, The Show That Never Sleeps, The Yins Report, which will be celebrating its 50th episode next week. Or not next week, this week, tomorrow. So definitely do check that out. So, without any further delay, let's get back into the second half of the show. So before we close the book on all things NCAA women's volleyball, there was some news that I needed to report on, and this is actually some big news. So Long Beach State's women's volleyball team has announced its new head coach. So this happened yesterday, and Long Beach State announced that its new women's volleyball coach is Tyler Hildebrand, Long Beach State alum, which is absolutely huge. Now, I don't know if there will be a opening press conference to welcome in Tyler Hildebrand, but he did release a press release, or Long Beach State did release a press release on Tyler's welcoming and whatnot. So that's big right there. Tyler Hildebrand comes from the University of Nebraska as he was the associate head coach for the Huskers. He was under the coaching tree of John Cook. Absolutely amazing, and I think this is a home run hire. He's not only a Long Beach State alum, but he has a lot of coaching pedigree, not just when it comes to indoor volleyball, but in beach volleyball as well. So I think this was a home run hire for Long Beach State, and I think he'll do some wonders. Unfortunately, Long Beach State did lose one of its top players. They lost Erica Lovett to the transfer portal as she is now transferred to Tennessee. It's a big loss right there just because she was one of the top freshmen for or not just the top freshman for Long Beach State, but for the Big West Conference. I think she kind of got snubbed when it came to all-conference Big West. But for Erica Lovett, she's now at Tennessee, which is huge, considering they just lost Lily Feltz to the transfer portal. So I think for Long Beach State, I think they do return a lot of players for next year. They have returned Kashana Williams and a few other players. They returned Kasia Partika, Nicole Hoff, Katie Kennedy. The list goes on and on. They return a lot of players next year. I think they only lose like 2 or 3. And I think Long Beach has been struggling. This year they fired their coach midway through the season, which was disappointing. But unfortunately, it was the decision that I guess had to be made. I think they should have waited till the end of the season, but it's tough. It's kind of tough when it comes to these times. It's kind of like the NFL, where sometimes coaches get fired because they aren't really performing all that well. So I'm sure Long Beach State will be back in contention somehow, some way. But all in all, for Long Beach State women's volleyball, I think they'll need a few more years to get back to their resurgent years, their ceiling. But with Kashana Williams returning next year, I think Long Beach State is in good shape for next year, and a bunch of other talented players as well. So we'll see what happens. But that is going to do it for the NCAA women's volleyball talk. Let's jump to some NCAA men's volleyball. So the NCAA men's volleyball season is just around the corner. The season starts on January 1st. So in other words, we are 12 days away from the beginning of that season. So first and foremost, the AVCA just released their men's preseason coaches poll. So this is the top 15. So since NCAA men's volleyball doesn't have the same number of teams like NCAA women's volleyball does, they actually have a top 15 and not a top 25. Otherwise, practically every team would be making the top 25, even the teams that are scrapping at the bottom. So anyway, so 15 through 11 consists of number 15, Ball State and New Jersey Institute of Technology, and George Mason at number 15. 14 is McKendree. 13 is Ohio State. 12 is UC Irvine. And 11 is Santa Barbara. So 10 through 6 consists of UC San Diego at 10, Grand Canyon at 9, Lewis at 8, Loyola of Chicago at 7, and BYU at 6. 5 through 1 consists of Penn State at 5, Long Beach State at 4, Pepperdine at 3, UCLA at 2, and the number 1 team in the AVCA men's volleyball coaches poll for this week is Hawaii, the reigning national champion. So there's that right there. I also definitely do encourage y'all to check out the interview that I had with Charlie Wade. I think it was back in November when I interviewed him, and all in all, it was a great interview. It was well worth the 2 minutes, and Charlie Wade's a great guy, so definitely do check that out. I'll pin that interview to the top of my Twitter account so y'all could see it, but I definitely do encourage y'all to check it out. So that's the AVCA men's volleyball coaches poll. So let's jump to the preseason coaches poll season rankings. So we'll start with the MIVA first, the Midwestern Intercollegiate Volleyball Association Conference. So this this conference has an 8-team conference, and the favorite to win that conference is Loyola of Chicago. They have 4 first-place votes. They have 59 points overall. Second place was Lewis with 49 points and 2 first-place votes. And Ohio State is third with 47 points and 2 first-place votes. Rounding off the 4 through 8 spots include Ball State in 4th, McKendree at 5th, Purdue of Fort Wayne at 6th, Lindenwood at 7th, and Quincy at 8th. So that's pretty much that for the MIVA. Heading over to the EIVA, which I believe is the Eastern Intercollegiate Volleyball Association Conference. So the favorite to win this conference, and this is actually no contest, which is funny. So this team is heavily favored to win the conference, and this team that's favored to win the conference is none other than Penn State. They have a whopping 9 first-place votes, and they scored 81 points in terms of the overall voting. It's rather surprising to see Penn State as a super heavy favorite. Like, 9 first-place votes. That's every team that voted for them in first place, including themselves. I don't blame them because they pretty much won the EIVA rather convincingly, and it's tough to really tell what the other teams will do. Penn State pretty much has a good chunk of its team back. So picked to finish second in the EIVA was NJIT with 65 points. George Mason was picked to finish third with 59 points. Princeton was picked to finish fourth with 56 points. Keep in mind they didn't have a season last year because the Ivy League decided to cancel all sports from last spring and last season overall. St. Francis of Pennsylvania St. Francis, Harvard, St. Francis, Harvard, Charleston, St. Francis of Brooklyn, and Sacred Heart are picked to finish 5th through 9th. There are actually 2 St. Francis's, St. Francis of Pennsylvania and St. Francis of Brooklyn. So there's that right there. And I think it's going to be an interesting EIVA, but is Penn State really going to just dominate? I don't know. I think NJIT can challenge them. It would be great if Ohio State was in their conference, but when it comes to geographical terms, Ohio State is in the Midwest, while Penn State is near the East Coast. So there's that right there. And then for the time being, we have the Mountain Pacific Sports Federation Conference preseason poll. So the favorite to win the MPSF preseason poll is Pepperdine. I'm very surprised to see Pepperdine as actually the favorite to win this conference because Pepperdine does return quite a number of players and they have another good recruiting class, and I think Pepperdine is going to be good as advertised this year. Now, I'm very surprised to see them good because the team that's picked to finish second is in their conference, and that's UCLA. Keep in mind, UCLA is number 2 in the preseason coaches poll. I'm a little surprised to see that just because UCLA always has a good recruiting class, and they return a good chunk of their starters. Some of their players did transfer, but UCLA never rebuilds. They always reload. And then BYU was picked to finish third. Unfortunately, I don't have the whereabouts of the first place votes and the overall points, but BYU was picked to finish third in the preseason poll. Grand Canyon was picked to finish fourth. USC was picked to finish fifth. Stanford, which saved its program, which is absolutely awesome, was picked to finish sixth. And Concordia was picked to finish seventh. So that's pretty much the MPSF preseason coaches poll. The Big West Conference has not released their coaches poll, which unfortunately disheartens me. I am really interested to see who's going to be the favorite to win the coaches poll. Or, not the coaches poll, who's going to win the Big West Conference, just because that conference is always stacked. You have Hawaii that's really good. They did lose a lot of players, but they should be back. Long Beach State returns a good chunk of its roster from last year. And then the question marks are UC San Diego, the runner-up, UC Santa Barbara, the team that won the Big West Conference tournament, and then you also have UC Irvine. The only not-so-semi-question mark in that conference is Northridge. Even though Northridge did beat Long Beach State last year, I don't really see Northridge going too far, but you never know. I'm not trying to be mean to Northridge. I'm not trying to hate on Northridge, but in years past we have seen Northridge just not put up the season that everyone expects them to have. So there's that right there, but we'll see when the coaches poll comes out. So that's going to do it for the NCAA men's volleyball talk. I know it was a little brief, but we'll be having more NCAA men's volleyball talk next week. So as for next week, for when it comes to set point, so obviously there's not going to be any volleyball going on, as no NCAA women's volleyball, that's pretty much over and done with. The next time I go live with set point, which would be next Monday, there won't be any volleyball until Saturday, which is the new year. So I pretty much will probably be previewing some of the matchups when it comes to that week. I want to say it's UC San Diego versus Loyola of Chicago, which that's going to be a fun matchup right there. And then also, I'm hoping I can get someone on as a guest. I'm hoping to reflect and basically say goodbye to the NCAA women's volleyball season of 2020 and 2021, just because, well, it was a very fun season, very fun past two seasons, as we had two NCAA women's volleyball champions that were first-timers, and then we had a bunch of other teams that had been making noise, and we even had one team that almost became the first double-digit seed to win the NCAA championship since Stanford did it in 2004 as the 11 seed. Gotta give a shout to Emily Eamon of Big Ten Volley Talk for that little helpful tip. So gotta give her props on that, because I actually did not know that. But there will be a show next week. It might be a shorter show than this one, but I will keep this train going, and we still got some NCAA volleyball in the tank. Like, once NCAA men's volleyball arrives, I think in February, NCAA beach volleyball will start, and then in March or April, we'll get the NVA, the National Volleyball Association, and then that will go until like June, and then eventually we'll have the AVP in like the summer. And then also next week, I'll be breaking down the transfers from some of these players to their new teams. Like, the players that have already found their new home. Like, I'll skip out on the teams that are, or the players that are in the transfer portal, because there's a lot of players that's currently in the transfer portal. Like, yeesh. So I'll be breaking down that. But that is going to do it for this week's episode of Set Point. Ladies and gentlemen, it is time to drop the beat, because I'm about to dip like a banana in chocolate. You feel me? Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Set Point. I really appreciate you all tuning in. If you tuned in live, I appreciate you. If you tuned in on the playback, I appreciate you. If you tuned in at work, I appreciate you. If you tuned in at any part of the day or night, I appreciate you. Big shout to the chat room, Larry B. and Ben Suttereth III for popping in and saying what's up. I really do appreciate you. Definitely do check out BS3 Network, because they are on Roku. Definitely do check out all of iSports radio shows. Definitely do check out the website and the Patreon. It would really help us out, and we would really appreciate your support. For everyone here at iSports Radio, this is Teran Rodriguez signing off. You all have yourselves a great rest of the day, great rest of the night, depending on where you're listening at. Enjoy your Christmas. Have a great Merry Christmas, or depending on what you celebrate. And be safe out there, just because COVID is still out there. The Rona shows no mercy. And I will see you Friday for the SoCal Supreme Sports Show. Everyone, take care of your bodies, and I will see you on the other side. Peace!